Hello, and welcome to History Talk, a show where we talk about history. Today, we're going to be talking about Northern Ireland and how it was formed. Hello, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about Northern Ireland and how it, as a state, was formed. So, Northern Ireland had been part of the island of Ireland for many a long time, but at this time, Ireland was not really in control. Ireland was being controlled by the British government, and they had no real power over their own affairs. So, while they were one island, they weren't their own. They didn't have their own power. But what do you think happened when Ireland decided that it wanted power? People who, wanted to not have that power and just let the English government in Westminster just control their every decision. And, some people would say, they are actually a little bit unaware of how it would affect Northern Ireland. So obviously, you could argue, they're not intentionally harming the Irish country, but maybe they're just harming it as a kind of a, because they know nothing about it. Because that's what happens when you have an empire and you're too arrogant and too stupid to think, let's actually think about how this will affect people. Because if you say, we're going to increase a tax on this product, you have to think about, because you own an empire, if just because it works in your own country, what if that completely causes a famine in another country? Then you have to think about that, because you can't just be surprised when that happens, because it's like, you will have an empire. So it's this kind of British ignorance which is the problem, because what it does is, not only do you have this thing where people want to just not be controlled, which is, it's a fair thing, why would you want to be controlled by people who invaded you? Essentially it's the big bully thing, where people are just kind of being the bully around the place, and they're saying, you'll do what we say, and people are saying, no, we don't want to. So that's the kind of thing, the situation there. But furthermore, this kind of level of not really paying attention, it causes really a lot of economic decline. It causes a lot of problems, which means that for years people are campaigning for at least some level of control over their own country. And it began with Home Rule. And this is when it starts to be talked about, because of people who want to stay with Britain, who don't want Home Rule, who want to be solely just give Westminster all the power. They are really mainly focused in Ulster, but more specifically, they're focused in certain counties in Ulster. So they're focused in 6 counties: Antrim, Down, Derry, Armagh, Fermanagh and Tyrone. Now, at first, Home Rule did not seem to be a problem for them, because they elected individuals to the House of Lords. Now, at this time, the House of Lords, which was, for those of you who don't know, is the secondary House chamber that all bills had to pass through. At that time, unfortunately, they had a veto. So if you had a bill which was, that they didn't like, then the Lords could just go boom, and there they could veto it, and the bill would be dead, and you'd have to resubmit it and all this sort of stuff. And really, because they had made deals with the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party controlled the House of Lords, any bill that related to Home Rule would just be killed. But then it changed, because then the House of Lords soon, they lost that veto, and suddenly now they were faced with a problem, because even though they were allowed to stop a bill for 2 years, that did not mean that nationalists were going to give up. So when they did not give up, and they began fighting, and then suddenly it begins to be talked about that maybe these counties could be separated from Ireland, and that Home Rule wouldn't affect them, that Ireland Ireland's Parliament Dublin would not be able to make decisions for them. And then, when Ireland gains full independence, then you begin to see this is a serious problem, because this isn't just a bunch of people who are, saying, oh, we want this. This is a bunch of people who are also backed by paramilitary groups. And the problem with that is that while, yes, you might get the IRA to cease fire if you gave the whole of Ireland away back to Ireland, but you'd cause a brand new conflict with just another paramilitary organisation. So, satisfy both of them? Well, of course, as you can see from Ireland's civil war, you did not satisfy both of them. And some people would argue that's kind of obvious. If someone is saying, give us the whole island, you're saying, no, we're only giving you this. And they're like, well, I don't really want that. I just want the whole island. And that's the position they're in. While some people would argue, well, it's obvious that, the violence is there. So you could argue, well, I know why you'd want that. But if, you see a house and it looks very nice and you want to buy it, someone says, well, actually that's infested with, rats, these bugs that appear not to be native to the country, and if they spread, they kill people. That would not be a good place to live in. Also, you're not allowed to change it in any way because there's it's a listed building. You might want to buy that, but you wouldn't want to live in it. Like, you wouldn't want to, but you shouldn't, because then it'll affect you in a certain way. So that's why some people argue, well, because of the violence that would have happened, it is, far better off that, they didn't give a full Ireland. But then you have to argue, well, if, but then people argue, well, the Civil War. But then you have to say, well, if people had realised, well, think it through. This is the British government you're talking about. You can't have a civil war over something that you can't really decide upon. Because if you and I are making a deal, and you are the oppressive person, and you say, well, I'm going to cause a war with you, that little conflict there, that was just us fighting it. That was just us trying to deal with you. But if you don't sign this agreement, there'll be war. This is what they had said. And what this meant was, they had to agree to separate Ireland. Now, while this did cause a civil war, it also caused the creation of the Northern Irish State. And unfortunately, it soon became clear that, yes, while some Irish people were not willing to accept that Northern Ireland could exist, well, neither could many unionists. It began to become a major problem, because suddenly unionists were using their newfound power, because they were now a majority, to discriminate against Catholics and nationalists. Of course, you might be thinking, well, how do you identify someone as a nationalist? Because if they're not actually saying it out loud, if not, publicly part of a group, if they're not, well, supporting it, then how exactly do you say, well, this person is part of it, this person is a nationalist? Well, it's weird because you can't. So a lot of the time, assumptions began to be made. So people start bringing the whole religion thing into problem, which is a very weird thing, because Christianity, while having its flaws, it does have a very weird thing where it has split-offs. But the problem with the split-offs is that those split-offs are actually more opposed to each other a lot of the time than, other religions that are different entirely, because they are arguing over the same thing, which is very weird, because, if you think about it, well, how do you know you're right? You're arguing over something when it's like, well, what evidence do you have that is correct? But this begins to show this kind of religion understanding, which by people that are saying, oh, you're a nationalist. Why? Because you're Catholic. You're a unionist. Why? Because you're Protestant. That does not apply. Yes, the majority of nationalists would be Catholic, but that tends to be because of the oppression. because you oppress people, then obviously they will not want to be oppressed. And those who do not want to be oppressed, well, they tend to, well, try and find a way not to be oppressed. And obviously it did change later on, which we shall talk about. But at the start, it just was like, well, let's be part of Ireland again, because, you know, that they actually, they're unlikely to treat us as, you know, fairly close to not even second-class citizens, just third-class citizens. How to treat them was not the best way to deal with the issue, but it's the same thing with Protestants. Not all Protestants were Unionists, and not all Unionists are Protestants. So it's a problem, because what begins to happen is that discrimination begins to run life. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you'd like to view other videos, that'd be nice. If you or you could subscribe. Apparently that's supposed to be good. I mean, I don't really see how it really matters, but apparently it means that you are shown to more people, and then your viewership increases. So it's like, well, you know, that kind of makes sense in a kind of way. Like, but why would you put that in place? It doesn't really make much sense. But anyway, you know, so if you want to subscribe, that's good. Or if you other videos, there should be some videos around the screen.